Welcome to the Foul Front Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, where our goal is to recruit and educate new hunters while entertaining the rest of you. Without new hunters and the mentorship of those more seasoned, this passion as we know it faces an uncertain future. So get the word out, turn the volume up, and enjoy the show, because you're on the Foul Front. All right, welcome to the Foul Front Waterfowl Podcast, episode number 12. This week we are talking all about scouting. We got Chase White from Hickory Creek Outfitters, and I just wanted to give a quick shout out to High Prairie Sportsmen over there on YouTube. You can find them on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all that stuff. A lot of good content and videos, and you might even learn something while you're over there. Also, please go check out our Facebook group or our Facebook page, on Facebook. If you get in there, we can get a pulse on exactly what you guys want to hear, because we are here for you, and we want to make sure we're covering the stuff that you want us to cover. Head on over there. We're always willing to talk. Let's get into this week's episode. All right, today on the episode, we have Chase White from Hickory Creek Outfitters. And Chase, why don't you go ahead and give us a little introduction?
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Ben. We're knee deep in turkey season right now, but of course, waterfowl is never far out of sight or out of mind. So we're constantly thinking about that and expanding on it this year. So we're pretty excited about what we've got going on, and excited to be on the show.
Nice. Where are you guys based out of?
So our home base is in Howard, Kansas, which is about 60 miles southeast of Wichita. And our new waterfowl expansion is going to be west-northwest of Wichita, out between Cheyenne Bottoms and Quivira National Refuge. So, but our main base is located there in Howard. So.
Awesome. So how did you get into guiding?
Well, that's a long story, but long story short, I was a professional bow tech through college, and met a guy. His name is actually Ben. Ben Everidge is his name, and he guided in Illinois for 4 years after college, and we became really close friends. And I'm originally from Virginia, and we became really close friends in Virginia. And after I graduated college, it was something I'd always thought about, and it kind of worked out. I ended up guiding in Illinois for a year, and had a good time out there. I just was looking for a little bit of a change, and then I've been in Kansas for 4 years now. So, and we do it all out here. I was mainly deer guiding in Illinois. We did a little bit of waterfowl, but not a whole lot. So, we chase the birds pretty hard now here in Kansas, so I'm always happy about that. So,
awesome. Well, I guess we ought to talk about the meat and potatoes of the episode. I don't want to keep you from putting those turkeys to bed or nothing like that.
Yeah.
I guess we ought to talk about the importance of scouting.
Yeah. Well, there is, in my mind, there is probably nothing more important than scouting. And you could talk to a lot of your hardcore guys and your real big waterfowlers and outfitters, and scouting is where your bread and butter is. Something I always try to tell people, that are maybe getting into it or trying to become more efficient. Everybody wants to spend 90% or 90 or 100% of their time hunting, and they don't want to do all the scouting. Well, I can promise you, if you spend 90% of your time scouting and 10% of your time hunting, your hunting is going to be leaps and bounds better. I mean, scouting is the single most important part in my mind to do pre-hunt, of course, and especially in the game that I'm in, running an outfitter. It's the most important thing, to get clients on birds and try to make guys successful on hunts and try to make some memories with them. So scouting is by far the biggest thing, I think, as far as getting your waterfowl experience started. So, yeah.
The reason I'm having you on today is because I've been hunting waterfowl seriously for 5 years. about. And when I first started, people told me you got to get out and scout. And I said, okay, what's that mean? What do I got to go look for the birds?
Right.
Okay. At first, scouting to me was literally just trying to find a spot to hunt.
Right.
Nothing to do with birds. But I think one of the biggest problems that weekend warriors have,
Yeah.
the biggest problem that we have is I don't have time. I don't have time. Exactly. The most precious resource that I have is time.
That's right. People have,
I wish I could pay $100 and know where all the birds are, but what's a good piece of advice for you when you're limited time? How do you get the scouting in?
Well, so I'll give you a little bit of rundown of what we do. And where our waterfowl operation has been based out of the last few years down here in Howard is a little bit different than the expansion that we're bringing about this year in central Kansas. We hunt mainly water where we're at. We don't have down here near Howard area. We don't have a lot of ag ground. There's some, but it's not like central Kansas where it's actually pretty much backwards. There's some water out there, but we're in cattle country here, and there's a lot of watershed lakes and cattle ponds and creeks and rivers, and so for us, scouting is a little bit different in both sides of our operation. We'll be different in both sides of our operation, but a typical day for us is, obviously we get up, do our hunt in the morning from what we scouted the day before, but we usually have one or two guides running the actual hunt, and then everybody else is scouting. And what we found that has helped us be more efficient is to literally have, I'll call it a mail route. Like a mailman's got a route that he does every single day, and he delivers to the same places. Well, we do something very similar to that, where we have guides or scouters that they'll check the same route every single day. And, with us hunting mainly water down here, we hunt a lot of loafing ponds, and, a lot of the birds will roost in some of these big watershed lakes, and then go to some of these smaller ponds and loaf, and they'll even feed. There'll be some smart weed and, that kind of some natural stuff in some of these ponds. But middle of the morning, after all the birds have kind of got done with their morning flight, literally driving around and try to find these birds on these ponds. And it may mean, you can't necessarily drive on a farm. You got to drive and park your truck and walk a half a mile into a place to check a pond, and then walk back out. And then, it's hours upon hours every single day, miles and miles on your truck, and, a lot of windshield time, and a lot of time spent looking through the binocs. But that's how we do it here. Now, in central Kansas, with some of the guys that I'm bringing on, it's going to be a little bit different. There's two huge refuges out there, and in those refuges will hold, sometimes up to 1 million birds, between the two of them. And it may be a case of driving around in the afternoon, trying to find a feed, or the morning, or it may be a case of literally going to the refuge and following the birds when they get up to go feed. So hunting fields is a little bit different scouting-wise than what it is timeline-wise for us hunting mainly ponds down here in Howard.
So, okay, excellent. Would you say, it's something you just said right there that resonated with me. You were talking about putting miles and miles on your truck. Me and a buddy, we got a truck at the same time. He's not a waterfowl hunter, but a buddy asked me, I went and got my second oil change. I said, second oil change? I'm like 5 deep right now. And yeah, specifically just from every time I'm on my way home, I see birds flying. I'll follow them within reason, but just to kind of check out the area or see where they're heading. But especially more during the leading up to the season, not so much during the season, because once I'm in the season, I devote 90% of my time hunting and about 10% to scouting, just due to time constraints.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've probably put 140,000 miles, probably 130,000 miles in my truck in the last 4 years. And a lot of that is driving around looking for ducks. So.
Oh, absolutely. So what would you say? All right, we know it's not just going out and looking for birds. Oh, there's a duck. What specifically are we looking for?
Right. Well, so there's a variety of things that I will look for. Timing is a big thing. Weather has a big factor on, you may scout birds in the afternoon and you may get a cold front that pushes through overnight. And those birds may not get up and fly first thing in the morning where the day before they were. How they're sitting on the ponds or on a field, and where they're at on a pond or a lake or a field. Are they tight to the edge? Are they in the middle? Are they up in a cove in a pond? Is there good hide? Are we going to have to run layout blinds? We're going to have to run panel blinds. We're going to have to run A-frames. There's a lot that goes into it. And once we've found a spot that we want to hunt, obviously the first thing is make sure we have permission. And there's a variety of ways that we go about it, but there's an app that I would say probably 90% of your guides or outfitters use, and it's called OnX Hunt Maps. And that is a invaluable tool for us as far as seeing landowners or getting a bigger picture of, maybe where the birds are flying from, where they're going to. But once we've found a place that we're going to hunt, it's all about the details at that point. We will stay there as late as we need to try to see, maybe if it's a loafing pond, maybe they're coming in at 7:00 in the morning and they're steadily coming in to 9, and then maybe they're sitting there. They might sit there all day and then maybe go feed the last hour, or they may sit there all day and then just go back to the roost. It changes, with weather and timing of the year. When it's colder, obviously the birds will go and they'll sit a little bit later in the morning when it's super cold, and then they'll try to hit some of those loaf ponds, and they may go feed a little earlier. At least down here in the Howard area where we've been the last few years. But biggest thing for me, obviously, is once I've found a spot, is hide. We'll run anywhere between, maybe just a couple of guys, 3 or 4 guys, sometimes running up to 12, 15 guys at a time, or, anything in between there. So where am I going to be able to hide, guys that, let's be honest, maybe aren't used to hunting that way. Maybe they, like to peek out of the blinds a little bit. Maybe they don't hide all that well. So what can I do as far as getting set up and making the most out of my scouting that I've done? And a lot of that has to do with hide. You can have the biggest, best decoy spread in the whole world, but if you don't have a good hide, then you're going to get a lot of birds that are coming 60, 70 yards and they're flaring off or they're not finishing. So hide would be my second thing after we figured out what we're going to do. And that comes from seeing what the ducks are doing and what they're doing when they're in the field or when they're in the pond, or they, like I said, in the middle of the field, on the edge. Later in the season, we start to see birds kind of filter towards the edges of the fields, at least down here. Because they, in the beginning of the season, they're going to feed out in the middle. They don't have to worry about predators or pressure near as bad, but they'll get in a field and they'll start feeding out that center, and they'll slowly kind of work their way out to the edges. And that's when you can afford to kind of hunt an edge, as opposed to trying to have to lay out in the middle with socks and backboards and, where you have to run that really, really big spread. So.
Right. Hey, question for you.
Yep.
You were talking about whether or not they're on the edge of these farm ponds or in the middle of the farm ponds. Now, does that tell you anything?
Well, it depends. We hunt everything from I've hunted a quarter of an acre farm pond, up against the edge. Just to give you an example of what variety we hunt. On the edge of, say, a milo field or a cornfield that has willow trees all around it, and I've seen as many as 2,000 or 3,000 mallards in it. Literally you couldn't stack another duck. They would have been sitting on top of each other. And then we hunt stuff. We had probably 18 to 20 days of ice last year, solid ice. I listened earlier today and heard Wade talk about ice, and he actually hunts with us every once in a while, and so I can attest to the fact that we fought ice pretty hard. And we run ice eaters and all that stuff, but we'll hunt some of that bigger water when everything starts locking up. That small water starts locking up where they have to go to big water where it's going to stay open. They got to have in order for birds to stay here, they have to have open water. I mean, that's what pushes the birds out. We've got food, but if you don't have open water, they're either going to stay where they are as far as, big roost, and they'll go out and feed. And, they do this thing back and forth where they'll trade. Half the birds will get up and go feed, and then the other half will stay. And they'll actually stay in a big watershed or a big, rock quarry and keep it open. And then they'll just filter back and forth. And just their movement alone keeps it.
You think that they plan that out? You think that's like something that developed evolutionarily as a survival method?
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, I really do. Otherwise they would all, if they weren't worried about it freezing, they'd all get up at the same time and get out. We hunted a lake last year. I call it a lake. It was probably, 7 to 10 acres. And we hunted it one day and shot like a 10-man in like 45 minutes. Just an absolute stellar hunt. And then we hunted it like a week later, and it was, with wind chill, I think it was -15. So there was all kinds of birds. This was actually, we were actually hunting a roost, which we don't typically do a lot, but we will, when times get desperate. But when all them birds got out, that water froze. I mean, within minutes. So I really do think they know that if some of them stay there and they keep moving around, and they'll keep it open. So it's they're essentially just being little ice eaters swimming around and keeping the water open. So
yeah, absolutely. That's what coots are for, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What advice would you give to somebody that's only got access to maybe a big WMA or a big lake per se? How would you tell them to go about, if that's the only place they can hunt? How do they scout it?
Well, sometimes if a guy was going in to hunt a spot and, maybe you don't have a boat, or maybe, you're limited on decoys. At that point, then you could need to fall back on your biggest thing is hide. I mean, I'm a huge component of that. I know most everybody is, but, if you can get set up in a good spot, maybe you're 100 yards off the X, but you got a really good hide. You've got the sun at your back. Maybe if you're lucky enough, the wind at your back or a crosswind. And you've got a really, really good hide, then you got a chance at pulling some birds. You may not shoot the real big flocks or anything like that, but if it's just you and 2 or 3 of your buddies and you guys can, get 4 or 5 birds in at a time, then that's all you really need. I'd rather finish, 5 or 10 birds, in good killable distance than have 100 come in and still shoot the same amount, because then you're educating a lot more birds. If you get birds to stay around for a long time and you educate birds day in and day out, then your birds will start to get stale and they won't work very good, and or won't work at all. And then you're having to change your whole operation. So getting into a spot like that, if you can get a good setup, get as close as you can to the X, quote unquote, and have a good hide, I think you could probably shoot some birds that way.
What do you do when you find the X, but there's absolutely no way to hunt it?
Oh, phew. Well, I think it varies from situation to situation, obviously. But what do you do? Well, there's a few things you can do. Obviously, you like to try to get as close to the X as you possibly can. There'll be times. I'll give you an example. Last year, there was a field that was about a quarter of a mile from one of our big watersheds that we have. And this was about 10 days into our freeze. Well, we couldn't hunt the field. We didn't have permission to hunt the field. But we had a watershed that these birds were flying over to get to that field. So we went in the middle of the night, 10, 11 o'clock at night, went in with chainsaws and cut a hole open and got the ice eater in and went back in the next morning and set a pretty good spread, almost like you would for a migrator spread. And, it took – the birds didn't really start flying until about 8:30, 9 o'clock, but 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock, we shot all the birds we needed. We shot our limit out, and we did that a few times in that one spot, just because we had open water and we were able to traffic some birds that way. So that would be example of not being able to hunt the X, but trying to adjust to where, if you can't hunt the X, then maybe you need to fall back and see where the birds are flying, see if there's somewhere that you can run traffic on them, or get set up close to them, and do everything you possibly can as far as hide and decoy spread and all that stuff to make sure that you can try to be successful.
Are there any tells, or when you show up and you're glass in for the birds and you see it, is there anything that tips you off that, okay, yep, this is going down, we're good to go, this is what I'm looking for? Just something specific a guy ought to look out for.
Well, so let's see. So we get a lot of a lot of these ponds and stuff that we hunt down here. We'll shoot graders. We shoot big Canadas down here. We'll shoot a few lessers, but we don't shoot a lot. But the lessers are going to be out kind of where our new part of the operation is going to be in central Kansas. But if I pull up to a spot and there's 1,000 geese and 2,000 or 3,000 ducks on a 10 to 12 acre watershed, and the geese are up laying on the ice, sleeping and preening themselves, and the ducks are just, if they look super comfortable, and they're not super alert, and they're getting in there and they're staying there, and and they've been there for 2 or 3 days, that's a pretty good sign that those birds are gonna, they're not just gonna not come back the next day unless something drastic happens. So if you can find birds that are comfortable or they've been there for 3 or 4 days, usually when you're hunting, when we hunt a field or a pond, there'll be birds that'll be going into it 2 or 3 days before we even think about hunting it. We'll let it essentially try to build up. The birds will get more and more comfortable and more birds will come to it, whether it's a field, in central Kansas with lessers and snows and specks and ducks, or whether it's a farm pond down here in Howard where it's mainly mallards and big geese. So we'll let, if we find a pond that these birds are starting to use or a field that the birds are starting to use, we'll let it build up quite a bit if we can, and then try to get in there after them. But, the flip side of that is if you're going in to hunt a field, if you let them sit there too long, they'll feed the field out. And then the day you go in there may be the day that they decide not to come back because there's not a lot of food left. So we found a field last year that is up near Leon, which is about 45 minutes west of here, that the farm, when the beans were about to be picked, they had a hailstorm come through and, beat up quite a bit of the bean pods. And we actually didn't hunt it until probably we didn't even get permission or find the field until January, and there was still food in it, and they had been in it for, on and off for a month at that point. So that would be something like if you walk into a field and you're able to go out there and kind of look for sign and look for food. I was able to go out and look in this field because they'd been there for a while and see that the center of the field was pretty well fed out. At some points they were feeding only, 15 to 20 yards off of a huge hedgerow, which is perfect for us. It was a south hedgerow, so we had the sun behind us. Had a great hide. The birds were coming from the north, coming off of El Dorado Lake, and we couldn't ask for anything better. So that's something that when scouting really paid off.
Okay, so aside from glassing birds from a distance and whatnot, so let's say I'm a guy, I get permission to hunt on this small farm pond, and I go trouncing out there about 1 p.m. Are there things that I should be looking for when there's no birds there? I'm out there on foot. What should I be looking for?
Well, yeah, sure. You can walk the whole edge of the pond. A lot of times, depending on what the wind has done, you'll see a lot of, if birds have been using it, you'll see feathers and tracks up along the banks. The ducks and the geese down here, a lot of times they'll land in the water. They'll get some drinks, they'll preen themselves, and then a lot of times they'll make their way over to the bank, and then they'll literally sleep on the bank. So you'll see tracks and feathers and all that kind of stuff. If you see, large globs of feathers and tracks and scat and all that kind of stuff, and it's fresh, that you're probably in a good area. Then you just have to figure out the timing. You got to figure out what time are they coming in here, what time are they leaving, how long are they using it for? Are they just popping in for a few minutes, getting a drink, and then getting out, or are they going to stay here for 4 or 5 hours? And then hide, of course. You figure out where they're going to be. You figure out you got the ducks, you got the geese. Now, where am I going to hide? How am I going to get into the pond without, destroying the farmer's land or doing anything like that? How am I going to get set up to where everything is in my favor as much as possible? So that's where I would go with, on a new piece, finding permission. You got permission. Now you got to figure out what they're doing. Sometimes you may have to sit on that pond for an hour or 2 or 3 or whatever and just glass it and wait for the birds and see what time they get there and see how they're acting when they get to the pond.
Yeah. What would you say? I know we talked about it earlier, but no responsible hunter likes to hunt his roost. He likes to figure out where the roosts are and then figure out how to chase the birds from there. But unless it's the end of a split or, like you said, you're real hard up for birds and it's getting a little rough. But how would I identify what a roost is if I don't particularly know what one looks like or know what that activity looks like?
Right. So if you're going into a place, I'll give you an example. We had a rock quarry that we could hunt, and the only time of the year that these birds were using it was when it was super frozen, literally 7 to 10 inches of ice on everything else. And the only reason they were using the rock quarry was because it was the only open water there was around. It was deep. We couldn't even run floaters in it because you got 3 or 4 feet off the bank and it dropped down, and the deepest part of it was 25 or 30 feet deep. Luckily, there was ice that was, that's when I did like having ice. It was 3 or 4 inches thick, and you could walk on it. And but if you're seeing them birds go in there at night, I'm watching this place, I'm watching it, and it's dark, and there's still birds going into it. They're not going. Very rarely are they going to go anywhere else. If it's getting to the point where you can't hardly see them, and they're still going into this place, or a pond or a lake or whatever, then that's a pretty good bet that that's where they're going to stay overnight. And what I've found, we have down in this area, we have, quite a few different areas where birds they'll be feeding in a field, for 4 or 5 days, and they'll change their roost every couple of days. They'll find a different feed and then they'll go roost somewhere else. They'll find a new feed, they'll feed there for 4 or 5 days, then they'll go roost somewhere else. So, that's how we can kind of get away with it a little bit. But if you have to go in and hunt a roost, which we had to a couple times last year, and you've got birds, you should probably make sure that you've got enough guns to go with you, because as soon as you get those birds out of there, I've had them come back in, landing on us in the dark, putting decoys out. They'll go out and fly around, or we'll go sit on a frozen lake somewhere until the sun comes up, and then they'll try to come back and get in that water. And we had a hunt like that with Wade last year, and it was pretty phenomenal. So
I think it was the second time I ever went duck hunting by myself on the Rio Grande. I pulled up my truck and I unloaded, and I heard a bunch of duck activity out on the river, and I thought to myself, oh man, what am I going to do? The ducks are here already. I guess I'm gonna just sit in the truck until it's shooting light, and then I'm gonna head out there. And
yep.
And then I think I learned that. What would you say? Don't worry about kicking birds off or bumping birds when you get in there. I mean, obviously, you got to set up when you got to set up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So there'll be. There's been a few times where I'll if birds are roosted somewhere, they may get up and go feed for a while, in the morning. If they're feeding twice a day, they'll go feed in the morning. And we'll go get there right at daybreak and literally wait for the birds to leave. Now, that may be 20 minutes after you get there, or it might be 3 hours after you get there. So that can be kind of a waiting game. If I know I'm going in to hunt it and they're going to sit there all day regardless, then we'll go in there and we'll bump them out and get set up, get everything squared away, shoot our limit out as quick as we possibly can, and pack up our stuff and get back out so that the birds can continue to come back. And if you can get a pretty quick hunt in, you're not going to hurt you're not going to hurt a lot of birds that way. I've hunted some roosts like that where, we'll be done in 15 or 20 minutes, and we get out and I go back an hour later and there's 4,000 or 5,000 ducks sitting right back where we had just hunted an hour before that. So, if you can get in and get out pretty quick, then you're going to be okay. And they'll come back. Most of the time they'll come back, and they'll come back in smaller numbers. Sometimes they'll come back in big droves. So that's why it's nice to have 5, 6, 8, 10 guns with you at the time, and have quite a few guys there to shoot with. And that way you can get you shoot your birds and you have enough guys to, maybe help pack out and get out of there as quick as possible.
My first experience hunting when I was younger was mostly deer hunting.
Right.
So when I went to start scouting for waterfowl, a lot of those same tendencies or procedures, principles, techniques carried over for me. Mm-hmm. And I was always being very cautious, treated almost like I was scouting or stalking deer when I was on these ponds looking for waterfowl. Last year, a buddy of mine invited me, and he said, in Oklahoma, and he invited me to come invite this farm pond. He said, hey, let's go scout. Okay. So he drives right up to the pond, and oh man, like, what are we doing? This is nuts. We kicked off a bunch of birds. And he's like, yep, they're here. All right, let's roll. So we pulled off, and then we watched how they came back and then how they set up in the wind. And then, the next morning we shot a 4-man limit in like 2 hours. But I wanted your take on bumping birds.
Yeah. If I can help it at all, the ducks or the geese, whether it's a field or pond, I'm gonna be like, it's gonna be like stealth mode. Like I'm trying to put a sneak on a turkey. We're gonna try to get in there as quickly and as quietly as possible, see what we need to see, and get back out of there. I don't ever try to bump. Especially if I'm gonna hunt somewhere the next day, the last thing I want to do is bump the birds, because they may just go find somewhere else to sit, and then you go set up in the morning and wonder where your birds were that you'd seen in there the day before. Well, you bumped them out the day before, and they have, found somewhere else, just as comfortable for them to go. So the reason that they're sitting there is because they're comfortable. They found a place that they like. They like the water. They like Maybe there's a little bit of food in it, or it's close to their feed field, and they get comfortable. And last thing you want to do is go in there and spook them. So I actually have a kind of a story on that. A place that we've hunted over the last few years. Last year was notoriously bad. I mean, 2 years ago, we shot like 850 geese. It was a big goose pond. I mean, it was pretty much when we hunted. We would shoot some ducks, but it was mainly geese. Like over the season, we shot like 850 geese off of it or something. And last year, it was just every time I would go to check it, it would be a few birds here, a few birds there, but nothing really spectacular. And then one day I was in there about 9 o'clock, and I said, man, all right, the birds are in here. And no sooner than I said that, here comes the cattle farmer with this round bale in the back of his truck, and he was feeding the cows not 15 feet from the pond. So he was going, I hadn't seen him going in and out of there because he may have been going in there at different times of the day. But every time I did have geese or birds in it, I would want to go in there and hunt. Come to find out, he was going in there and feeding his cattle and bumping the birds out of there. So I'd go in there and we would have a decent hunt. We didn't really hunt it. I think we maybe hunted it 2 or 3 times last year, versus probably 10 or 15 times a year before, or more. But yeah, that was from the cattle farmer going in and bumping the birds middle of the day or in the morning. So
that brings 2 questions that I have. Well, I mean, the first is really more of a comment. You like you told me earlier, you got to know a well-rounded picture, time-wise, of where you're hunting.
Right.
You got to know what's going on, not just during the hunting times, but also things outside of it. The second thing is that how do you approach landowners to discuss some topics like that? Hey, can we not do that? Or, how do you approach that? Or did you approach him at all?
Well, most of my landowners that I lease from, are understand that, that they're going to make some money, if we can hunt, and they'll do what they can to try to accommodate you, or accommodate us. But we had such good hunting in other places last year that I wasn't super concerned about it. But that would be something we haven't talked about it yet this year, but that'll be something we'll probably discuss before waterfowl season this year coming up. But most people will work with you. I mean, if you respect their land, you don't rut up their fields. You don't leave the gates open and let their, cattle run out or, leave trash all over the place. If you work with them and you do everything in your power to take care of them, they'll take care of you, as far as the experiences that I've had. And most of the landowners I have, they want to see us be successful. They know that we're paying them or, helping them out whatever way we can. And, they want us to be successful. So a lot of them will go out of their way to try to help us do that as well. So
I think another thing that's really important for the listeners to pull out of this episode is that exactly what you just said in the very beginning of the episode, how you got 1 or 2 guides that go run the hunt, and then you've got X amount of guides out scouting. And I think it's super important. The most valuable resource you can say, oh, I'm going to spend more money on decoys, or I'm going to go buy a boat, I'm going to do this or that. Well, go make a dang friend.
Yeah.
Split up scouting duties. Split up decoy responsibilities. Make your own little poor guy duck club.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, that's it. That's a good point. I mean, I can't stress it enough. Like I said in the beginning, if a guy doing it for himself, if and like a guy that can only maybe hunt Saturday morning, and then he's got to go to kid's, football game or, somebody's birthday, you're going to have a limited amount of time that you're going to be able to hunt. So you want to optimize that the best you can. So it may be a case of getting up early, before work and going to try to scout some birds, and then, keep an eye on them over the course of the week and say, okay, well, Saturday, that's where I'm going to go hunt, versus the guy that just goes in somewhere blindly and hopes to kill a few birds. And you may have a tremendous hunt, and you may also go there and watch bluebirds fly over all day. And that's the difference between the guy that, puts in that little bit more effort, maybe a couple hours a week, or, maybe 20 minutes, changing your route to work 20 minutes or whatever, just to go by and check your pond or check your field or your slough or whatever you might be hunting. That's the difference between the do-it-yourselfers having a fantastic season or a fantastic hunt, versus I had an okay season, and that's just all in the pre-work, the preseason, the pre-scouting, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Now you're working with a lot more. Your area is a whole lot larger than mine. Obviously, I've got my limited, permissions that I have. But is there anything to be said about? I've got 4 game cams. Is there anything to be said about setting up game cams, trail cams on ponds or back sloughs or places where birds are going to be, just to kind of get a general picture of what time birds are moving in, moving out, or I don't know if that's a thing or something that y'all do or not. But
well, that's not something that we necessarily do, but I know that for instance, Browning makes a trail camera that we use for deer hunting, and it has a really cool feature on it. It's called time lapse, and you can set that camera up to take daylight pictures, one picture at a time, or one picture a minute, excuse me. And then at the end of it, when you go back and pull your camera card, you just click play. It's a video that shows you the entire day from sun up to sundown, a minute at a time. And it kind of puts it together on a time lapse. If you had 4 or 5 cameras and 4 or 5 different places to hunt, and you put those cameras out like that, then sure, that's something that you could, you could go in the middle of the night if the birds aren't roosting there, go in there and pull the cards, and see what you got. It might tell you, well, hey, I can sleep in and go hunt at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, or hey, I need to get in here early and get set up. That for sure would be something that a guy could do to try to, optimize his hunt.
Okay, so you have scouted your field or your pond or your river or lake, either way, and you're all ready for the hunt the next morning. Now you're watching the weather. Is there anything that pulls you off that scouting or that particular pond to go somewhere else or to write it off? Is there any sort of weather pattern that's, dang it, it changes the game plan for you?
Yeah, for sure. There's some, some ponds and stuff or lakes that we hunt down here that I know for a fact I really can't hunt it on a west wind. It's a lot like, in that mind, it's a lot like a deer hunt, because, I don't, unless it's cloudy, but if I can't hunt it on a west wind, to have the optimum wind, because I'm going to be staring at the sun all morning, and I'm not going to have very good hide, where if I could set up on the east side, I don't care if it's sunny or, cloudy or whatever. And then, we'll get, if you get a big push of cold weather overnight, as long as your water's not going to freeze or, it's not going to push birds out, then you know that you should be okay. You may have to ride it out and sit for a few hours, before you really start getting into them, but you should be able to get on birds. But, if you've got a big full moon and it's, 15 degrees outside and it's been frozen for 10 days and you get a 25 mile an hour north wind, there's a good chance that you're going to lose some birds overnight. You're going to wake up the next morning and be like, where did all the birds go? Because they're going to get up and they're going to fly south and try to find something a little bit more open. Especially on that full moon where they can see at night. So that's something that you may, but in that same breath, you may also get fresh birds too from up north. I always kind of where we're at, we get a lot of birds out of Nebraska, obviously South Dakota, North Dakota, and all that stuff. But I would keep an eye, if we had some birds that were maybe starting to get stale, I was kind of keeping an eye on weather up north, in Nebraska. Hey, it's getting ready to be -15 and they're going to have a stout north wind. Them birds may try to get up out of that river and, come on down south. So that's something that we look forward to as well, is when we see those big cold fronts push in up to the north, we know that we may be getting some fresh birds. And, if you've been waterfowl hunting at all and you've got a pretty good migration, fresh birds is always a good sign. Because sometimes you'll get birds, that have been in your area for a month and they've seen it all, they've heard it all, and they can be really, really difficult to work. So I know that last year, like I said, we had some cold weather for a long time, and we had some birds that would start to get stale a little bit there, but we still killed them really well. Yeah, we look forward to those migration days. So that weather is another big key, of course, to scouting and just looking at your season as a whole. For the next 5 to 10 days, you may know what you have and what you've got coming, or so.
Now we've talked about obviously the when and the where, and also you've touched quite a bit on the hides. What else? When we're talking about scouting, how does it play into what are you looking for as far as decoys or calling techniques?
Yeah, so I love going back to geese. We love shooting big geese here, and I'm looking forward to this year. We're going to be shooting a lot of little geese out there in central Kansas. But something that we spent quite a bit of money on last year in effort was a lot of sleeper shells. We bought a lot of Dakota sleeper shells last year because we had a lot of ice, and the geese would show up, and they'd go to a place, or they'd go to a pond, and they'd get in there and they'd get up and sleep on the edge of the ice. So, like I said earlier, I've tried to mimic. You want to try to mimic what the birds are doing there the day before. If there's 1,000 birds in a hole, not everybody can afford, 10 or 20 dozen full body decoys or floaters or whatever. So you want to try to optimize what you can, and you want to try to set your decoys and set your spread as similar as what you can to what you see the birds doing the day before. I know if I go in and I see this place, okay, it's going to be the same wind tomorrow, and these geese are sitting in here, on the south side of this hole. They're all sleeping, breast facing the wind, and the ducks are maybe hanging out on the other side of the hole. That's how you want to try to set up. I mean, they're geese, and the geese and the ducks will tell you what they want to see. However they're sitting in there the day before, or however they're feeding in the field the day before. That's, if you can mimic that, then that's the ultimate goal. Is to try to do exactly what they're doing and set up how they're set up in the wherever you're going to hunt.
What is in your kit? What's in your tool bag when you go out scouting in the afternoon?
Let's see. Probably a white monster is probably the number one thing.
Hey, those are the ones that are good for you, right?
Well, if you ask my fiance, she'll tell you no.
But there's no carbs or no sugar, right?
That's my argument. We can throw a shout out to Barton Ramsey from Southern Oak Kennels for getting me hooked on those. I've got a Southern Oak Kennels pup, so but a white monster for sure, a good set of glass, good set of binos, and then my phone having OnX on it is a huge deal. And if we can afford to having another set of eyes in the truck never hurts, you know. Um, and then, if you find a place to hunt, then we'll, I've got another guy named Scott, and say him and I are scouting in 2 different directions, and I find something really good, it may be a fact that when he gets done doing his loop, he may come over and we may look at everything together and try to get a game plan together. Um, but definitely the binos, the Onyx, and the white monsters, for sure going to be in my truck. So, and my dog might be riding with me too. He usually likes going scouting because he gets to nap in the truck while I ride around looking for ducks for him to get the next day.
Awesome. Now, you've got your Onyx. I think one of the most important things, I also carry Onyx. Do you also carry the white pages or like a phone book, or how do you go about contacting landers? A lot of times I just look for the house or similar property owners' names, and I know it's pretty difficult to find someone's phone number these days without those phone books.
Yeah, it really is. And a lot of times you can search on Google and find everything that you would find in the white pages. White pages actually does a premium. And if you can afford to spend the money on that, I think it's only like, maybe $15-20 a month or something. I think you can do it monthly, but I run into a lot of times trying to find phone numbers. They might be numbers that are, not connected anymore or anything like that. But,
the landline from the 90s.
Yeah. AT&T put it in, when they put their, first piece of wire in the ground. But for sure, Google, and if I can, I really prefer to try to go talk to people face to face, just because I like to have that handshake. I like to, for me, leasing land or getting permission is not just about, hey, I'm going to go hunt your land, I'm going to pay some money. I really try to foster relationships with these people, because a lot of these people that have been out here for a long time, or landowner you may meet, we'll go to dinner with them. We'll cook them some dinner. Last year, Megan, my fiance, at the end of the season went through and made banana nut bread, for all of our landowners, just a little token of our appreciation, just something to go a little bit further and show them how much without them, we wouldn't have an operation. So, I really like to try to go that extra mile and just, you may learn something. You're going to learn something new every day. I promise you, if you go sit with a farmer for an hour, if you've got time to do it, which, we talked about, time is short usually for me. I'm always looking for birds or trying to get ready. But, that's a big deal for me as far as, getting permission. And, those handshakes go a lot further than what people think, because you got to figure that these people have probably been approached maybe 10 or 15 times over the course of the last few years. And they may have told 10 or 15 different people no, so it makes a big difference if you really try to build relationships with people, and, and it's not just hey, I'm just here to use your land and, I'll give you a little bit of money, so that's big for me as far as trying to get permission. But the white pages on Google, and then if you can possibly, go shake their hand and talk to them, and, heck, they might take a case of cold beer and tell you you're good, so.
Absolutely. So I guess to kind of get into a couple other few things here before we sign off, but what kind of blind are you running?
Well, that's a good question, because I've hunted out of avians before, and I like them to a degree, but what I've found is that, the A-frames, the Avian X A-frames, being that they're angled on both sides, most of the time you don't need to shoot out of both sides of the blind. You're only going to be shooting out of one side of the blind, front. So I actually went through, and I was at the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania show, the Great Outdoor Show, last year, and came across Redneck blinds, and they have a
The same guys that do the deer blinds?
The same guys that do the deer blinds, yep. They have a blind. It's just called the waterfowl blind. So it's very similar to the A-frame, but it's made out of steel. It's steel tubing. So it's a little bit heavier duty. I found that in the A-frames, have clients that, want to rest their elbows up on the top, and then, you get a bend in the A-frame or whatever. But they're a little bit heavier duty, and they're flat in the back. And then on the front, it's got an angled door that literally pushes forward when you go to shoot. And so I really like that, especially for guys, that may be a little bit older and, they may not be able to pop up as quick. And that was really nice. And probably my favorite thing about it is that they have big enough to hunt 3 guys out of in each one. They've got little peepholes cut out of the front of the material, one in front of each guy. And you can throw brush and grass over that, and everybody can look out of the front of the blind and be completely concealed, but be able to see what's going on.
That's so important to the experience, I think, especially since that's what you're providing as an experience. I think anytime I take a new guy out, I always it's hard to stress hey, keep your head down, don't look up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was something that I really liked. And Megan, my fiance, is a professional photographer. And that's something that we do out here too, is we offer a photo package with the hunts. So guys can come in and literally buy a photo package and get their whole hunt photographed by Megan. And she's had some phenomenal photos. But anyway, she captured a photo of a gentleman from Virginia that came out and hunted with us last year. That was probably, I think he was close to 80. Just a guy that you could look at and tell that he has seen a lot of ducks and he's seen a lot of geese. And she captured a picture of him looking out the front of that redneck blind through that peephole. And I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. And it was really neat because that's something that in maybe an A-frame that he wouldn't have been able to experience. He would have had to have his head down, or he, maybe could see the birds. They flew directly over the top, but being able to see the birds out front, it makes my clients a lot more efficient shooting as well, because they've got an idea what the birds are doing. I'm always telling them, they're coming from the left, or, they're coming straight on. But if they can see them a little bit, then when they pop up, they already know what direction they need to be shooting. So
yeah, you can't talk someone onto a target acquisition. They
got
to visually see it.
So that's really nice. That's those blinds we've really liked them so far. So and we've had great feedback from clients as well on those.
Sounds like it. I mean, you said you run an SOK dog? Southern Oak Kennels?
I do. And I heard Wade talk about his today. And, I bought Jet. He's 2.5 now. I bought him, I would have gotten him in December. I guess it's almost three Decembers ago now. Barton brought him up from Mississippi and came up and hunted for a few days. And, we like our SOK dogs, and like Wade was saying, it's actually a huge family. Barton is actually going to be the officiant at Megan and I's wedding next June. He's actually going to be the one that's going to be marrying us. So
now that speaks a little bit to you're not just getting a dog, as Wade said.
No.
You're getting a wedding officiant. It sounds like too. No, just. Yep. That's good. That's good stuff. I'm in the camp right now. I'm not in a position to get a 4th dog. My wife loves to rescue dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And they're all retrievers. Well, they're all retriever breeds.
Right.
But I got maybe half a duck dog out of all 3 of them. I think I'm gonna try to get Barton on here to pick his brain about training. Oh, maybe, just some training tips, or talking about getting your dogs tuned up or out of practice dogs. Maybe, similar situation to what I got, working with what you got. Because I'm a few years away from being able to purchase myself a new dog.
Well, so. Cornerstone's a pretty useful tool, and I think I heard Wade mention it, but Cornerstone's a pretty useful tool. I use it every once in a while just for tune-up drills with my dog, and and Megan is actually getting a puppy this fall, well, late fall, early winter, from there. So she is going to probably, I'm going to try to be as hands off as I can and maybe just try to guide her because it's going to be her dog and she's going to run him. And, she actually goes and hunts with us and brushes blinds and, she does it all. And so I'm going to try to let her do all the training as much as she can. So I'm going to try to stay hands off as much as I can, but we'll see how that goes. I was going to try to guide her, but let her do all the work. So
I know you said your fiance, Megan?
Yep.
Yeah.
Megan, yep.
You said she's a professional photographer?
Yeah, she's actually a professional wedding photographer. And she lives back in Virginia, but she spends all of December and January and then parts of February out here. She does a lot of the cooking and stuff at the house. But she's a grinder, man. She gets out there 4:00 in the morning with us and, helps us brush blinds sometimes. And, I've met some guides that she would run circles around, not in my operation, but I've seen some in some other places that, she was doing it pretty much every day. There was a few days where I had to wake her up at 4:00 and I said, I love you, but you should probably sleep in today. But no, it's great having her around, and she's become quite the waterfowl photographer. She's got stuff that's well recognized, and she's only been really doing it, the waterfowl side of things, for about a year and a half now, for 2 seasons. And, she's had some stuff that Sitka's picked up and Drake Waterfowl and, some pretty big name companies. And she does an awesome job with it. And she captures a lot of moments in the blind, a lot of high fives and,
Yeah. Where do we see all those photos?
Well, you can see some of them on our Instagram page at Hunt Hickory Creek. She runs the Instagram page for us, and there's some on there. And then you can follow her on Instagram as well. But there's quite a few photos she's taken is on our Instagram account. And then most of our trophy pictures and stuff are on our Facebook page, at Hunt Hickory Creek. And then we've got some stuff on the website, but a lot of that really good content is through her is on our Instagram page. So
awesome. So what kind of kennel do you run for your dog?
Is there any other kind of kennel to run than a gunner?
All right. So I took a good bet that was the case. So we just had, it was 7 weeks ago, we had our first kid. And before that, all the dogs, they would just ride in the back of my truck. Not the back bed, but, the back of the crew cab.
Right.
Yeah. And, you can say what you want about that, but...
hey, my dog does it, so...
Yeah. Well, now we got this kid. We're heading up to Nebraska next weekend. This weekend, I should say. And we don't have the space. We got a kid, and then you have 3 dogs in the back, the both of us and our gear. So, one of the dogs is going to have to ride in the back. So, crap, I got to get a kennel. And we started talking. She doesn't want the dogs in the ride in the back because it's unsafe. And I said, well, check out this company real quick. And next thing I know, she's going to, in the checkout bin, and whoa, that's like $500 right there, And we got to talking, and okay, I said, well, call them, see if they can get it here by Friday. And the customer service there, he's like, hey, when I get to the office, I think he was already in his truck headed home, but he said when I get to the office, I'll make sure it gets shipped out and
that's awesome.
have that thing to you by Friday. So, all right.
Yeah.
And then another thing, I didn't choose this option, but they have a payment plan, which is
that's nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I bought mine I bought mine from Barton. I think he's a gunner kennel dealer, but I met Addison at the SOK Summit in September last year, and he's a super guy. But yeah, they're pretty awesome kennels. If you spend money on, you try to protect things you spend money on, and I've spent quite a bit of money on my dog, but he's more than a dog, obviously. He's been in a hunt camp since he was 8 weeks old. So whether it's turkey season, deer season, duck season, goose season, whatever, to spend $500 to potentially avert a disaster one day is worth the money, in my mind. So Megan is for sure going to buy one for her dog. She might see if they can wrap it in Kevlar and steel as well, the way she is with her animals. So, but yeah, they're great kennels, man. I can't say enough about them. And they really are a great company, and they have some great products. So, but I was going to tell you, we talked about Megan a little bit ago. I don't know if did Wade tell you how I proposed to Megan last year?
Nah, he did not.
So we had a goose hunt last year, and the hunting wasn't all that great. But Barton and a bunch of guys came up from SOK, and Reagan Renfro, and Wade was actually supposed to hunt with us he hunted with us the next day. But I proposed to her in a goose field last year up there in Leon. So Jet brought the ring box out in his mouth, and we got engaged in the middle of the goose field. So that kind of tied everything together as far as SOK and guiding and Barton and all them guys. So it was a pretty cool experience. So
that is really cool. It's very non-standard because I think most marriages end in a goose field,
not begin,
not start in one.
That's exactly right. Well, I'm blessed that I've got somebody like her to support me and in all my adventures. So we've got a lot on our plate going forward, and we're booking up guys for this new expansion, and it's looking good. So we're really excited, and it's definitely good to have the significant other behind you 110%. So
yeah, well, you can't ask for, if you didn't have anything else, if you had a hole in your waders, all your decoys were broke, muddy, and and your shotgun jammed after the first shot every time. If you have the support and love of your significant other while you're out there in the field, that's all you can. That's all.
Yeah, I think Wade can attest to that too. I'm pretty sure Lydia deals with a lot with Wade hunting too, because he's a pretty hard hunter. So
yeah, my poor wife, she sure does a good show of it. So
yep, can't do it without him.
Nope, no, we can't. Hey, now, so you got one of the listeners down there, right? Hunting for turkeys?
Yeah, Devin Alt is in right now. He killed a turkey yesterday afternoon. Yeah, we got on a bird yesterday afternoon and got him one killed, and he's out right now this afternoon. So hopefully he gets the second bird this afternoon, and then he's heading back tomorrow morning. Head back to North Carolina. So.
Awesome stuff. Good. Getting him back down here for duck season, huh?
Yeah. I think we were trying to get him to come back out for duck season or goose season. So I'm sure he's had a good time, and we've really hit it off. So I think he'll be back for more. We've shown him a good time. So.
All right. Well, last personal question I got for you here. What was the first duck you ever shot?
Oh, the first duck. Well, the first waterfowl I ever killed was a Canada, and that was in Virginia.
Hey, that counts.
A big Canada goose, yep. And then, so I guess the first duck I probably shot. Oh, me. You're really testing my memory now. I want to say it was probably a wood duck. It's probably a wood duck is probably what it was. There's not a whole lot of hunting back on the East Coast like it is out here, but hunting a beaver swamp back in Virginia. I think it was probably a wood duck. So, shot my fair share of buffleheads and all that other kind of stuff, which guys maybe in Kansas would call maybe a trash duck, but in Virginia, that's you get what you can, you take what you can get, I guess. So.
All right. Well, why don't you let the listeners know one more time where they can find you or book a hunt or try to book a hunt with you or something?
Yeah, so my name's Chase, and we're at Hunt Hickory Creek here in southeastern Kansas, and we're expanded to Central Kansas this year, so you can get a hold of us through the Facebook page or www.hunthickorycreek.com. There's some phone numbers listed on there, and all the booking information is on there as well. And feel free to get in contact with us. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and then we've got a web page. So get in contact with us, and we'd love to have you out, show you a good time.
All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on and learning us up on some scouting and giving us some of your knowledge.
All right, man. I sure appreciate it, buddy.
All right. Yep. Have a good one.
All
Stay
right,
safe.
You too.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Foul Front Waterfowl Podcast. Please come join us on our Facebook group, the Foul Front Waterfowl Podcast group, where you can connect with a good group of hunters, because we're all in this together. We need to act like it so that hopefully our great grandkids will be hunting ducks over our favorite public lands. We also ask that you go ahead and give us a written review on iTunes and give us 5 stars if you think we deserve it. And we really do want to hear back from you so that we can give you the best possible content. And if you get in on that Facebook group, you can get in there and you can ask questions and you can tell us what you want to hear next, or you can tell us what you don't like. And we'll be sure to tailor things to our listeners. So, all right. Stay safe out there, and we will see you next week.